the film's still very vivid, and people still come up to us in the street and say, "You're the guy off Brastoff," which I love. That's rather than certain other things I've done. If they say, "Oh, you're him off so and so," or whatever.
Yeah, but considering you've had such a glittering career, I mean,
I've been around a bit.
You have. You've been around a lot. I mean, Poirot fans will know you, for instance, straight away.
It's usually Poirot.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys actually still come up and remember you from Brastoff.
Yeah, and that's always a good thing, because I think what it means is that the film, people are still watching it actually, and I don't think it's dated. I think the things it's talking about, especially in the political climate we're in at the moment, they can trace back some of the thinking politically to the Thatcher era, and that's why we're in some of the trouble we're in. You know, so I'm not saying that's the whole reason they like it. I think it works as a great story, and emotionally it's very vivid.
Well, if I ask you about making of Brastoff and actually being in Grimethorpe and Grimethorpe people, what did you learn from them?
Well, I think when we first arrived, they were a little bit suspicious of what was going on, understandably. But I think they very soon realised that we were on the same side, and that we were actually highlighting what had actually happened to them. When I learned really what we were on at and how important it was that we were there was when we were in the pub across the road from what used to be the entrance to the mine. There were some ladies who burst into tears talking about it and said, "If you told us like 4 years ago that our mine would shut, we'd never believe you." And they were in tears because they still couldn't believe it. It was that near after it closed for it still to be a very painful thing. And also the place was in a bad way, you know. The people had steel bars on their windows and doors, you know. There was a lot of crime, a lot of guns, bad things going on. It's been turned around now. It's a good place. I know full well that it's much better, but actually being there in the place gave us a kind of insight into what it really was like and made us do it right.
Well, I mean, obviously this was like 10 years after the miners' strike, but the reality by this time was that pits were actually about to close, including Grimethorpe.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you find yourself caught up in the emotion of all that?
Completely. That's what I mean. Because we were actually in a pub with people who were actually saying, if you told, I think it was like, you'd have to look this up. I think it was about 3 years after the mine had closed that we were there. And they're actually saying, 5 years ago, if you told us that, we wouldn't have believed you. That our community could change so much and be decimated, really, by those events. Because that's what it was. The heart and soul of the place was ripped out.
In terms of what you made, this wasn't just a movie, was it? This was more like a documentary, wasn't it?
It's not like a Ken Loach movie, which has got a sort of a kind of impact that makes you believe it's a documentary. That was some of those things like the Wednesday plays that were made at BBC in the late 60s and 70s. It was almost like you felt you were watching a documentary because it's so real and so vivid and made the political points so hard and so kind of on it. I don't think this is like that. This is more a romantic thing. So I think you always know you're watching a film. You know you're watching actors impersonating these people. But I hope we do it with dignity and show that these people are, you know, wonderful people, and their story needs to be told.
I don't think I've ever watched it without somebody in the room, normally me, having to wipe a tear out my eye.
No, I know.
What are you like when you watch it?
I'm the same. I haven't seen it for a while. We watched a couple of years ago. We did a thing in London at the Tricycle Cinema, and I hadn't seen it for a long time then. And there are bits that they just get you. Certainly Steve Tompkinson's role in it, when you see a guy who basically loses everything, that gets you.
I mean, there were some great performances in there, not least of all yours. But what would you do in terms of Steve's role?
Yeah.
And what he brought to his role, very early in his career as well, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
very early.
How special would you say that performance was for the film?
I think it's very special, and I knew Steve actually. already. We'd worked together. We'd done a bit of radio stuff together. We'd been cast as brothers, believe it or not. He was a bit younger than me, more than once. And we also did that was later, but we did a TV series called Downwardly Mobile. I don't know if you remember that, where we were brothers. And this was a kind of breakthrough role for him. I think he thinks it's probably his finest. I mean, he's a fantastic actor, don't get me wrong, and what he's doing now, DCI Banks and stuff, is sensational. But I think he got to places in himself that he hadn't done on other things, in this.
But what a great cast as well. Ewan McGregor being there.
Yeah,
well. I mean,
Ewan.
what would it like to work with these people?
Well, Ewan, of course, I worked with again on Little Voice, which is also Mark Herman. And Ewan was a young lad, between Brastoff and Little Voice, his career really was going places.
Could you see any of the Jedi Knight in him at that time?
Not really, no, and that was the wonderful thing about him, because he didn't change. He was still the same Ewan, and he still liked going out and having a couple of beers and getting about. He was totally unspoilt by that kind of fame coming so young. I'm just trying to remember when Trainspotting was. I think Trainspotting maybe was just after Brastoff. Yeah, I have to look that up. I'm not sure about that.
And of course, the late great Pete Postlethwaite. I mean, what a magnificent part he played. And he went on to kind of conquer Hollywood, but I think he was still very proud of this film, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he felt it was, as we all did, it was a labour of love. And I remember, I knew Pete. I'd worked with Pete a bit before. And I remember the first day we actually arrived in Grimethorpe, doing a few days rehearsing before we started filming. We assembled in the community centre where the band rehearses. The real band is there, so we're all kind of plonked down within the band with the real band members with us, which is first morning, we're getting to know them and think, well, this is strange. I've never played a tuba before, but I'm going to learn how to make it look like I really am playing it. And then I'm sitting there and suddenly Pete arrives, my mate Pete. He stands up there and they do a playback of the music and he's conducting it. And I'm thinking, how can he do that? This is fantastic. So he invested a lot of time.
Well, something I didn't ask Steve actually, but I think he told me off camera that him and James Stewart were the greatest mimers of the trombone of all time. But I mean, did you actually learn anything with the instrument? Did you learn to play a note in it or anything at all?
I'll tell you what I did. I can't play it, and I played the violin when I was a kid, so I could read music and I understand the musical notes. So there's my mate Paul, who was sitting next to me on tuba, and I got him to mark on the score exactly which fingers are being used for any of the notes that the tuba was playing. And I thought it was my business to follow those to the hilt and make sure I was always playing the right stuff. I can't blow and make a good noise, but I could do that also the fingering was right. And I have to tell you that my son, George Jackson, is now a conductor, is in the early stages of his career as a conductor, not brass bands, but a conductor. And he did a masterclass of the LSO in London a few years ago. And we were there, and in the interval, we were in the bar, and this guy ran up to me and he said, "You're my favourite tuba player." And I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" And he said, "My name's Patrick Harrold. I am the principal tuba player of the London Symphony Orchestra, and I love Brastoff, and you do a great job." So I thought that was the ultimate compliment, right? Really, wow. That I decided to really try and do the fingering properly as it was.
So that's got to have been your greatest piece of acting.
In a way, yeah. In a way. But yeah, I could follow the music. I knew where the notes should be. I can't produce the notes. I don't know how to play a tuba, but I could. And also the breathing. It taught me when you would be breathing.
Well, do you know what? It was just such a great role, and you've said that obviously 20 years ago, and time does move on, and you've obviously kept in touch with the community, and you know how it's progressed. How do you think it's come out the other side after 20
Well,
years?
it's come out the other side, and funnily enough, I don't know whether you know this, but a couple of years ago, the MP for Barnsley East, Michael Duggar, who invited some of the cast. Steve Tompkinson was there, Jim Carter was there. I don't think Tara was there. Anyway, we went down the House of Commons, Mel Dyke had written a book about the resurgence of grime thought, and they brought some sixth formers down, and we met in a reception room at the House of Commons to sort of launch the book, and we met a lot of the kids and talked to Dennis Skinner and John Prescott and people who are interested in this. And Steve and I have kept in touch with Michael Duggar because we're really interested to know what's going on at that.
Not every piece of work is a life-changing experience,
No.
but I gather this was.
I think it was actually, yeah, because you are sort of thinking, well, it's not often that you can relate completely to this. Every morning when we went to that village and did what we do, did those scenes, we're actually in the place where it's going on, and the people are walking past who've experienced it, and we have a responsibility to do it right, and I think we all felt that.
You've done some great things since then, but I'm just wondering what's next, what's coming up next?
Well, it's sort of slightly different, but there's a series I've been doing called Raised by Wolves, which is Kathleen Moran and her sister Caroline have written this. It's a comedy series really on Channel 4 about their life in Wolverhampton when they were teenagers growing up on a very rough council estate. None of them went to school, they were all educated at home, and there's about 7 kids from a little baby up to an 18-year-old, and it's about their life, and I'm their granddad who's been chucked out and comes to live with them and all that. And it's very different, but I think it's all right.
And if there ever was a sequel to Brass Stuff,
yeah,
would you be in it?
Oh, I hope so, yeah. I hope so, yeah. I've still got enough breath to do the tuba, I think. All fingering.
Phil, listen, thank you for your time.
Great, good to see you.
Thanks, man.
All right.
That was lovely.